This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're joined in the studio by Jessica Ottney Mahar, New York Policy and Strategy Director for the Nature Conservancy, who's here to talk with us about the state's $425 million Environmental Protection Fund proposal. Welcome back to the show, Jessica.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
So I want to get into this record investment the governor is proposing, but first off, the Environmental Protection Fund, how is this different than any other sort of environmental spending that the state might do? And what is, I guess, the backstory to this EPF that we seem to have conversations about every single year now?
Thanks for asking that, because it's one of my favorite questions. The Environmental Protection Fund was created in 1993. And it's the state's dedicated source of funding for environmental programs. So a lot of folks in communities might know the programs more than the Environmental Protection Fund. So it funds things like municipal recycling. So funds towards the blue box that you put out for recycling at the end of your driveway. It funds things like land conservation. So when the state adds new tracts of land to the forest preserve or a state park, the money comes from the Environmental Protection Fund. It also pays for things like municipal parks and zoos and botanical gardens, so places like the Utica Zoo or the Bronx Zoo, the Buffalo Zoo. It supports programming there. And it helps communities do things like protect water quality and waterfronts. Mm-hmm. So a lot of places that have public beaches, either on the Great Lakes or in the Adirondacks or down on Long Island's coast, they get funding from the Environmental Protection Fund. It's also doing things like helping with fund things like whale stranding organizations that help animals that get stranded in places like Riverhead. So that's really exciting because we have so much amazing wildlife across the state that needs support. So these are funds that the state isn't just using themselves. They're actually granting out to cities and towns and not-for-profit organizations to do work in communities. And since 1993, it has benefited every single county in the state of New York and every borough in New York City. So it's got really great presence across the entire state.
Well, considering the laundry list of examples you just gave citing what can get funded, it seems like the definition of the Environmental Protection Fund is pretty broad. Is this outlined in statute, or is this one of those things where I know it when I see it?
No, it's outlined in statute, and there are 4 specific accounts in the Environmental Protection Fund: open space, parks, solid waste, and climate change. And then within those accounts, there are very specific programs that can be funded. And so each year, communities and environmental organizations and other groups come to Albany asking the state to continue to fund the Environmental Protection Fund because it is so helpful in every community. And that's why we're going to be here this week in Albany. We're very excited about Governor Hochul's budget proposal for the Environmental Protection Fund. She's proposing $425 million, which is historic funding. The first time that much money was ever provided was last year. So this is a continuation of that historic funding level. And 100% of the funds are dedicated towards environmental programs in the Environmental Protection Fund. So all that money will go out the door into projects and communities across the state.
Well, you made the point that there are different categories for the EPF, so clearly there is some thought into what can get funding. But in terms of the funding level itself, is that spelled out? Is there an expectation that we're supposed to get X amount of dollars, or is this just a product of either the state's finances or the governor's interest in funding something like this?
Well, there's no formula, if that's what you're asking. I would say every part of the budget is a product of, the legislature and the governor's negotiation and interest. And what we're excited about is that there has been strong bipartisan support for the Environmental Protection Fund since it was created. So Democrats, Republicans in the executive chamber, in the legislature have all supported this program because they see that it provides real impact in communities, and it also helps the state leverage local funding from municipalities, private funding from donors, even federal funding. And so it's been so beneficial that it's enjoyed support from pretty much everyone over the life of the program.
And what has the funding looked like in the past? Because I'm now getting used to the $425 million proposal, so maybe I'm not getting as excited as I used to be. But is this an area where historically maybe there was underfunding?
Yeah, and definitely there is always in the environmental sector need that outstrips the supply of funding, right? There's a lot of work that we need to do in communities to keep our drinking water clean and the air we breathe clean and make sure everyone has access to nature. But in 1993, when this program was created, it was $37 million. So, over the last few decades, it's grown significantly. And again, we just reached this funding level last year. So in a year when there are so many competing needs, we're really excited to see the governor proposing $425 million. We think that this is a good step forward, and it shows her strong commitment to these issues.
And is this an area where we will have to wait and find out what's going to get funded or the general breakdown of funding? Or does the governor lay out, hey, here is where I'm going to prioritize this money?
Yeah, the budget actually does lay that out. It's a very long list because each of those 4 accounts that I mentioned have a lot of programs within them. But there is a list of the way the governor has proposed to fund this, which is on our website, which is cleanwaterandjobs.org. There's a page for the Environmental Protection Fund, and you can actually see a chart there that shows how the governor has proposed this funding to be spent. A lot of it, because the funding is being carried forward with the same amount as last year, is being dedicated to similar programs in a similar amount as last year. There are a couple of changes around the edges there, and I think that'll be the subject of negotiation with the legislature.
If you were pulling the strings behind the scenes, is there anything you would do to improve, let's say, the administration of this? Is there anything regarding the timeliness of money going out the door, or how things get funded, or the nature of what gets funded that you would want to improve upon?
Yeah, that's a great question. Spending money and spending it responsibly really does take time. And so there are a lot of different programs administered by different state agencies within the Environmental Protection Fund. That's a really important conversation and one that we're interested in having. Last year, for example, the State Department of Environmental Conservation and the Attorney General's Office did for the first time a memorandum of understanding to enable the use of title insurance on state land acquisitions of a certain kind.
Hear more in the Capitol Press Room archives.
That's right. Thank you very much. And so that's the kind of work behind the scenes that will help make program spending more efficient. They're also doing really great work to try and marry different programs. So putting out a request for proposals for the Environmental Protection Fund and also coupling that with maybe some Bond Act money if it's for a similar purpose. So the state's doing a good job of trying to find efficiencies. I think more and more our organizations are coming to the state now with experiences and they're open to discussions about how we can have these programs run more efficiently, which is important.
Is there a capacity issue that the state encounters with something like this? Do we have, say, enough bodies to actually review paperwork and implement this money in a timely and effective manner?
Yeah, the good news is the governor's proposed some new staff at the Department of Environmental Conservation in her budget as well, outside of the Environmental Protection Fund. And so that'll be helpful in administering a whole slew of environmental programs. And then there are also some innovative ways that the state is partnering with not-for-profit organizations to do some of that. So a great example of that is the Land Trust Alliance. They have something funded by the Environmental Protection Fund called the Conservation Partnership Program, and it's a re-grant program that enables them to grant out to other land trusts funding to do their work to protect clean water, forests, trails, nature centers. And so that way the state is actually getting some capacity from the not-for-profit community to get this funding out the door. They're doing that similarly with Parks and Trails New York on a grant program for parks. So there are some new and innovative ways that the state is using partners to help increase efficiency in these programs.
Well, we've been speaking with Jessica Ottney Mahar. She's the New York Policy and Strategy Director for the Nature Conservancy. Jessica Ottney Mahar, thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you for making the time.
Support for the Capitol Press Room is provided by New York State United Teachers, a statewide union of nearly 700,000 professionals in education and healthcare.